when neither or stars appear for many days, and no small tempest rage, all hope of being saved was at last abandoned. It began as a whispering in the air. The day had been beautiful. The sky was like a perfect dome of plasma blue as the clouds danced, drifting delightfully under the bright new horizon. The sun had been shining. The sea was as neat and tidy as plush velvet, as it safely and serenely slumbered in its own majestic blue robe. It started as a coolness, a welcome relief from the unrelenting heat. It was just a hushed breeze, like the gentle breath of a child's mouth against their mother's bosom. It was just a light drizzle, as the rain began softly strumming its own symphony against the ship's stern. But something in the air was changing. The clouds, once sunlit, began to gather in a dark and luminous manner. The sky, once a display of bright colors, began to assemble the color of gravel. The wind, once gentle, began to swirl around the ship, picking up pace with every turn. The rain, once a beautiful ballad, began to drum and hammer against the deck. The sea, once harmonious and serene, began to pounce upon the ship like a lion upon its prey. And all of a sudden, they were in a storm. Breathlessly, anxiously, frantically, desperately, they did everything they could. The cargo was completely emptied overboard, with almost everything else they could muster in an attempt to make the ship light. They did everything they could. Chains and rope were used to try to strengthen the dilapidated vessel as mighty rushing water threatened to tear plank from plank. They did everything they could. The sails were fastened and torn, fastened and torn, and fastened and torn as they played a dangerous game of back and forth with the boisterous wind. They did everything they could. The sea anchors were dropped to gain some stability for the ship, but the waves continued to throw the vessel like nothing more than a cork amongst the lashing sea. They did everything they could, but there was nothing else they could do. They were in a storm. For days, the rain would not relent. The sea would not rest. The wind would not retire. They were in a storm, a vicious and violent storm. And if the rain and the wind and the thunder and the lightning weren't enough, then it became dark. So dark they could no longer attempt to navigate their vessel using the moon and stars. So dark there was no way to see whether the next wave or next rock was coming. So dark it made for a sick sense of suspense. So dizzying and nauseating, it robbed the passengers of their very desire to eat. They were in a storm, and you lose things in storms. They lost their cargo in the storm. They lost their anchor in the storm. They lost their sail in the storm. They lost their gear in the storm. They lost their light in the storm. They lost their sight in the storm. They lost their direction in the storm. They lost their hunger in the storm. And finally, the Bible records, they lost their hope in the storm. Have you ever been in a storm where you seem to be navigating this journey called life just fine, and all of a sudden clouds start forming on the picturesque sky of your existence? Have you ever been in a storm. Where it seemed like the rain in life would not relent, and no matter how hard you tried, you couldn't find solace. Have you ever been in a storm where wave after wave of disappointment crashed against your heart, and there was nothing stable to hold on to as life rocked you back and forth? Have you ever been in a storm where darkness rules the day and you can't seem to see a way to navigate out of the hell you have found yourself in? Have you ever been in a storm? Because you lose things in the storm. You can lose your peace in the storm. You can lose your strength in the storm. You can lose your joy in the storm. And some of us, many of us can testify, we have even lost our hope in the storm. And I would argue this afternoon that it is not the rain or the wind or the lightning or the thunder that sink our hearts in the storm, but it is the dark and ominous cloud of why that seizes and suffocates our hope. This question of why echoes in all of our hearts at one time or another. It is the authentic and genuine human response to what we see as unwarranted suffering, especially when we feel like we have done so much for God. Why? Why? Why did my loved one have to die? Why did I have to be laid off? Why did the relationship have to end? Why the sickness? Why the heartbreak? Why the disappointment? Why the injustice? Why the struggle? Why the storm? So how are we to have faith in the storm when we don't know why? How are we to have faith in the storm where there seems to be no way out? How are we to have faith in the storm when we have lost so much? How do we have hope in the storm? It is here in the storm where we meet the Apostle Paul in the text. But Paul is not on this boat as pastor or preacher, but as a prisoner. His unwavering witness to the gospel of Jesus Christ has once again placed him in a precarious predicament. He has been captured by Roman authorities, charged with insurrection, chained, forced upon a ship, and now finds himself in a storm. And this isn't Paul's first storm. No, Paul has been shipwrecked 3 times. Paul has been beaten with rods twice. Paul has been stoned. Paul has been lashed. And with Paul's entire life in the book of Acts is the constant navigation of storms. And his life in this text, contrary to our popular belief, served as evidence that having a relationship with Christ doesn't exempt one from being in a storm. One can even argue that Paul's life and this text are proof that being an ambassador for Christ and living Christ and preaching for Christ may be the very thing that gets you in a storm. This is a significant challenge for our understanding of God. We presuppose if we give our life and witness to God, in return, God should give us luxury and comfort. But there is nothing luxurious or comfortable about the gospel of Jesus Christ. Preaching in the gospel that disrupts the established order will get you in the storm. Preaching a gospel that confronts sexism and toxic masculinity and rape culture will get you in a storm. Preaching a gospel that challenges racist and institutional racism will get you in a storm. Preaching a gospel that critiques classism and materialism will get you in a storm. Preaching a gospel that resists homophobia and transphobia will get you in a storm. I know it doesn't sound as sexy as the westernized, individualized, commercialized Santa Claus Christ that we're I'm not suggesting that all of life's storms are placed within this category. imperative truth of this text is that a life lived with Christ is a life that will lead to a storm. Not to a greater platform, but to a storm. Not to a bigger salary, but to a storm. Not to a better car, but to a storm. Not to a nicer house, but to a storm. Not to a larger following, but to a storm. They were in a storm. And the Bible says a messenger from God came to Paul in the storm. The messenger of God came in the storm. The messenger of God did not send a message from the elegant and eternal balconies of heaven. The messenger of God did not yell from some gold-ornate throne room. But the messenger got in the storm. Perhaps the confirmation of God in a Christian's life is not about the absence of storms or the deliverance from storms, but the presence of God in the storm. Maybe the point of the story is to highlight that we serve a God that will get in the storm. That we serve a God that will not only pick us up, but can sometimes come low into the muck and mire of life's muddiest moments. We serve a God that is not afraid to get wet by our tears. A God that does not flinch at our flashes of anger. A God not rocked and reeled by heartbreaks and disappointments. We serve a God that will get in the storm. Not only does the messenger get in the storm, but Paul says the messenger stood by his side in the storm. And that's a good reason to have hope when everything seems to be falling apart, that no matter the storm we may find ourselves in, not only will God get in the storm, but God will stand with us in the storm. The Bible records that the messenger stood with Paul. And then Paul stood amongst the passengers. Since God had stood by Paul's side in the storm, Paul then had the strength to stand in the storm himself. The same storm that was so violent and vicious it caused ships to break apart, Paul is standing in. The same storm with winds and waves so boisterous and belligerent it caused light to cover its face, Paul is standing in. The same storm that was so relentless and restless it caused the passengers to think that they would die, Paul is standing in. And sometimes the miracle is not that God takes you out of the storm. The miracle is that God gives you the power to stand in the storm. See, standing in the storm has nothing to do with how much suffering one can withstand. Standing in the storm has to do with the one who you are standing with. And if the God of the waters can stand with us in our storm, surely we can stand in the storms of life. To stand in the storm is the commitment to continue to live. To stand in the storm is to commit to a rebellious imagination. To stand in the storm is to say, no matter how much the wind blows, no matter how much the rain falls, I'm going to stay right here. To stand in the storm is to write the book anyway. To stand in the storm is to go to the job anyway. To stand in the storm is to go to the class anyway. To stand in the storm is to preach anyway. To stand in the storm is to sing anyway. To stand in the storm to realize it hasn't always looked good or felt good or been good, but I'm still standing. The storm was raging when Paul was standing. They were in a storm. And there in the storm, from the mouth of the messenger, was a word from the Lord. The same God that stood in the storm is the same God that spoke in the storm. We can have hope in the storm not only because God will stand with us, because God will speak to us in the storm, with the rain falling, with the waves crashing, with the sea roaring. God will still speak. With the lightning flashing, with the thunder booming, with the wind howling, God was still speaking. With the ship rocking, with the plate splitting, with the stern cracking, God was still speaking. And I'm glad that God still speaks in storms. I'm glad that the waves of life don't block God's voice. I'm glad that the thunder of disappointment doesn't render God mute. I'm glad that the rain of sadness won't drown God's voice. God speaks in storms. God speaks in storms through God's word that restores us. God speaks in storms through songs that encourage us. God speaks in storms through dances that inspire us. God speaks in storms through family and friends that uphold us. God speaks in storms through nature that reminds us that every night must give way to a bright early morning. God speaks in storms, and just as God speaks in our storms, we too, like Paul in the text, must speak in the midst of our own misty and stormy seasons. When our communities are in a storm, rocked and reeled by poverty and violence, we must speak. When our people are in a storm, tossed and turned by injustice and prejudice, we must speak. And God knows our country is in storm, with the racists in the White House and the rapists on the Supreme Court, and we must speak in the storm. They were in a storm. And here is the word of the Lord in the storm. Paul, you will lose the ship, but you won't lose your life. Our English translation flips this, and it really takes the tension out of what the messenger says. Paul, you will lose the ship, but you won't lose your life. It's a strange word in the storm. On one hand, there is the promise and assurance of loss. You will lose the ship. On the other hand is the promise and assurance of life. But none among you will die. It's a strange and contradictory word in a storm. It's two conflicting clauses. Two contrasting clauses that are held together by the conjunction, but. If you remember in elementary school from Schoolhouse Rock.
Come on, God.
Conjunction, junction. What's your point? Looking up words, phrases, and clauses. But the word but is used as a conjunction when there is a contrast in the second clause in light of the first clause. You will lose the ship, but you will not lose your life. The word but is used when the second clause is unforeseen, unanticipated, or unexpected. The word but is used when the second clause comes suddenly, swiftly, or as a surprise. You will lose the ship, but none among you will die. The first clause acknowledged the power of the storm. But the second clause acknowledged the power of the